Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this next episode of Fiberside Chats. I'm so happy to have you here today, and my special guest is going to be Ashley Hoffman of Cedar View Farm. So if you feel like coming on camera now, Ashley, whenever you're ready to. But today we're going to be doing another one of these interviews, and so I'm just going to ask her a couple of questions to get to know her better. And if you have any questions, if you're watching this during the live, feel free to put any of your questions in the comments area so that we can read them. I can read them to her at the end of the interview, and you can hear from her directly. And so if you are watching this on the replay as well, feel free to just go ahead and leave your questions or comments in the comment area. You can tag either of us and we'll come back to answer any questions that you may have. So if you can, my dear, just to unmute yourself so that we can hear you. But welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. So just to kind of like start us off, right? We're starting to get into the warmer weather, especially
Yes.
as a New Yorker here, seeing the spring and the greenery and all of that is really exciting because I know that means that there's going to be like shearing and fleeces going on and all of that good stuff. And so just a little bit about you. I know that you said you also have sheep. So could you just tell us a little bit more about what kinds of sheep you have and when can we expect to see the goodness that they have as well?
Absolutely. So I raise fin sheep. They are amazing. And so they are kind of an all around just incredible breed. They were initially imported to the United States to actually increase the prolificacy in the commercial breeds. They also happen to have wonderful fiber. They have luster that rivals long wools. So they take dye beautifully. They also come in all different colors. We've got whites, blacks, browns, and then patterns within those colors. We've got badger face and piebald. So we've got ones that are spotted like a dairy cow, all kinds of really, really cool colors. And they're just absolutely amazing. They are super friendly. They'll come up for chin scratches, and since they are a heritage breed, we actually don't dock their tails. Their tails are only about 4 to 6 inches long, and I have certain lines that I call my tail waggers, and you give them their little chin scratches and their little tail just goes crazy. They're just wonderful. They're a medium size breed, so my ewes typically are about 160 pounds, some a little over that, some up closer to 200. And then my rams, of course, are a little bit larger. The one thing I love, I was just talking to a new shepherd this morning that's looking to get some fins actually for dairy purposes, but she was concerned about keeping a ram and having young kids. And I was telling her about one of the great things about fins is their personality, and they're so sweet. And I've had up to about 15 rams before at one time. And they're just wonderful. They're not, your typical rammy behavior where you have to kind of watch your back when you're in with them. They'll come over for chin scratches, and they don't really give much trouble. So they're just an awesome breed, and their fiber is to die for.
Wow, that sounds amazing because like I don't have any experience with knowing the difference between like a nice sheep's personality or like a grumpy one or whatever like that. So what attracted you to this specific breed of sheep?
Yeah, so my farm is not huge, and because of that, I can't have 1,000,002 sheep here. I can't keep all the sheep, even though I would like to. But so they lamb in litters. Last year we had a litter of 6, we had a litter of 5 this year. Typically it's singles, twins, sometimes triplets for most breeds. These guys have litters. I expect my girls to be able to have 4 lambs and raise those 4 lambs to weaning, pretty much unassisted. So you can have a small group of mama ewes and end up with a decent sized lamb crop. They will average about 3 lambs per ewe. So it's nice for smaller kind of homestead type farms where you can't have a ton of sheep because of land
Oh no, I think.
constraints. They're pretty tiny once you get 3, 4, 5, 6 in there. My smallest has been about 2.2 pounds, and they grow quick, so they're just a lot of fun. And so that kind of attracted me. And then of course their fiber. I I was only crocheting at the time. I since am now a little bit more comfortable with knitting. Wasn't even spinning at the time, but I wanted my own source of fiber and tried out a couple breeds, but I keep going back to the fins, and now all I have are fins.
Okay. So so when you said you were like crocheting first, is that like the first fiber art thing that you
Yeah.
got into?
Yeah. Yeah. That was for the first for me. And then once I got my sheep, I was like, well, maybe I can learn to spin. So I fell down that rabbit hole. And I still love to spin. I need to make more time to be able to sit and spin just for me, but I love to spin. And then of course, with the fin wool being able to take dye so well, then I kind of fell down that rabbit hole and started dyeing to see what color combinations I could make and things. Um, and then I learned to weave, and I finally have completed my first sweater that was knitted. And I'll tell you, it was funny. I completed it, and then I frogged the whole darn thing because it was awful. It turned out beautiful, but it would have even been too big for my husband. So I was like, oh, I don't need to worry about the gauge, and I kind of looked at it a little bit, and I used some of my hand spun, and it was like a DK weight, but it was a beautiful sweater, and I have pictures of it. And now that yarn is being used for another purpose, and it's on my needles again. So I did it, but I can't wear it.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the, I don't want to say like the learning tragedies of doing a new craft,
Yes.
right? Is that you can have all of the right
Yes.
tools, you can have a pattern and all of that, but sometimes, as a beginner, we just don't know what we're doing in
Yeah,
all, facets of the
absolutely.
craft. And there is kind of I want to say like a trial by fire, right? That we can
Yes.
learn just by jumping
Yes.
in. Like myself, I wasn't really a pattern follower. Like I didn't know about like knitting
Mhm.
patterns and stuff. So
Yes.
I just thought if I took a sweater that, fit me and I tried to
Sure.
match it, that would work. But then
Yeah.
I didn't know about shaping and everything. So then when I put it on, it
Yeah.
was like really awkward, and with you, like I remember ripping things out. I'm thinking like I'm ripping out 20 hours. Like I didn't even
Yeah.
care about the yarn. It's like
Yeah.
these are minutes of my life that just
Yes.
feel like they got
Yes.
wasted, that I'm just watching unravel before me, But
Yeah.
it is interesting when projects become almost like these time mile markers,
Yes.
and we can like use them as like these documents of what we've experienced,
Yeah.
especially the first times that we do something, like the first time we spin or the first time
Yes.
that we crochet or knit, so that's really interesting. So what kinds of things do you do now? So you started with crocheting, you have the knitting
Mhm.
sweater, you do the spinning, you do the dyeing.
Yeah.
What other kinds of things can we do with like fin sheep fiber so we can know about it?
Anything. Anything. And the cool thing, so with a lot of other breeds of sheep, part of the breed standard is their fiber.
Mhm.
Whereas so for fins, it's very open. So from one farm to the next, and even at different farms, you'll get different lines. So within my own flock of sheep, I have the majority, and I'm breeding for a next to skin soft fleece. That's
Okay.
what I want across the board. My ewes, my rams, everybody. And I'm almost there. I'm at about 95% of them right now are next to skin soft, like around my neck. But you can find more open fleeces, you can find more dense fleeces, you can find more of that long wool type Shirley Temple kind of open type fleece. So if you're buying fin fleece, you really have to ask that shepherd, what type of fleece are they breeding for? Because it varies so much. The breed standard is literally a single coated fleece that is fairly consistent front to back. That's it. And it varies. So for me, I want that soft next to skin soft fleece, a nice handle, that luster. I like more of that crimpy fleece as opposed to that more open fleece. Those open fleeces tend to felt. And they also attract VM like nobody's business. So I like that dense fleece that really repels that VM and is nice and soft and crimpy.
Okay, so when you're saying that you're dyeing the fiber, do you dye it when it's yarn and you like send it out to a mill to get processed, or like
All of it.
what part of the process? So like you shear your sheep and then like what happens
Mhm.
with the fiber?
So I shear, and I'm trying to do more of the shearing myself. I have a wonderful shearer in Maryland that comes to shear. She's actually coming at the end of this month. And we shear and then I skirt it, and I'm trying to hold some of my kind of favorite fleeces to hand process, and then the rest goes to the mill. Traditionally, I have mainly gotten roving back. This year, I'm going to do 50-50. I'm going to have about 50% of it roving, the other 50% yarn. And I will hand dye it once it's washed, just as washed fiber. I will hand dye my roving, hand spun, mill spun, whatever. And I'll dye it all the way through. And depending on what stage it's in will depend on how I dye it and kind of what I'm envisioning that end product to look like. So I'll dye roving differently than I would yarn, because I know that once it's spun, those colors are going to blend differently.
So when you're dyeing, do you like to use more acid dyes or natural dyes, or
Yes.
you use all of them, or?
I haven't really delved into the natural dyes yet, and I actually have some seedlings started for a dye garden, which I'm super excited about. But traditionally, I've just used the acid dyes, but I also want to have and do some of the natural dyeing as well. I like to be able to produce things here on my farm and then take that all the way through to finish. So that kind of fits perfect in with those natural dyes. I'm also a beekeeper. And so like to be able to take my beeswax from my bees and turn that into my beeswax soap. I like to take it beginning to end. And so it was kind of hard for me to start sending things out to the mill because of that beginning to end that I love so much. But I got to a point where there's just not enough hours in the day. So I keep some to hand process all the way through. And then the rest goes to the mill. But
Well, how many sheep do you have altogether then?
currently I have about 30 ewes. Right now I've got 5 rams. And then there's Roberto. So
Who's Roberto? Now I'm curious. Okay, my interest is piqued.
He is Roberto is a Suffolk Camp, and he was my son's market lamb last year for 4-H. We're very involved in the youth in our community. I'm leader of our county's 4-H sheep club. I'm also on the board for our farm show for the 4-H and the FFA kids. I actually have a group of really, really little, they call them Clover buds, the little ones that are coming on Friday to learn about the sheep. And Roberto was my son's market lamb project last year. One of his I bought him. Typically the kids will raise the project animal, and then in July we have our show, and then on Monday after the show those animals are auctioned off. Those kids receive that money, they can then use it for college, things like that. Well, I bought Roberto back. So Roberto actually is going to become Socks by Roberto is my plan. He's got a lovely springy, perfect for socks wool. So when Roberto is sheared at the end of the month, his wool is going to become sock yarn. But he is the one kind of oddball. So I have all the fins and then Roberto. So he's a wagger.
Awesome.
Yeah, so he's awesome. He would probably come in the house and hang out on the sofa if I let him.
Well, if
But
you have any pictures, can you
I
post pictures of
will.
him in the comments so we can see what he looks
Most
like? Yeah.
definitely. Yes, he's adorable and he's fun and he's the biggest nuisance in the world. But I love him to death. We were putting up some fencing yesterday and he's got to be right there grabbing the box of fence staples and running off with it, and he's wonderful. But
Yeah, there's definitely a soft spot I have for like the animals that are the cute troublemakers. Those are the
yes.
ones
Oh,
that are
and he
like, okay,
is.
I'm gonna let you get away with it just because you're
Yes.
cute.
He's the Dennis the Menace. He's wonderful. So I've got the 30 ewes and then the 5 rams, Roberto. We have 3 naughty dairy goats. And then I've got my 54 lambs that from my ewes that just finished up lambing. So a bunch of those are already sold to other breeders or pet homes, fiber homes. But there's probably going to be about 8 to 10 ewes that I'm going to hold back for myself.
Okay, and so I know you said early on that sometimes they can be used for milk as well. So are
Yes.
these, because like I don't know the difference between the sheep that are just purely for their fleece versus like, is this like a
Sure.
dual purpose breed where you
Yeah.
also
So
like will eat them too?
yep, exactly. So I would consider fins kind of triple purpose.
Okay.
So wool, dairy, and meat. They definitely do not pack on the muscle like your traditional meat breeds do. I find that the way I think about it is if a ewe is going to be able to have quads and nurse those quads to weaning, she's got to be a heck of a milk producer. So they produce milk very well. Therefore, they're also kind of built like a dairy animal. So think of like the difference between like your Black Angus meat cow, and then you've got like your dairy cow. Their body type is totally different. It's like a ballerina and a linebacker. They're just different. So the fins have that leaner carcass. And then they're wonderful as fiber animals. And then also there's quite a few people that are using them for dairy as well, either the breed by itself or crossing it with something like an East Frisian that's your traditional dairy breed. And they're looking for larger teat size, so it's easier when hand milking. You can actually use all your fingers instead of like 2. So they need the breed kind of whichever shepherd has them and what their use is, they just kind of evolve into that. They're just an amazing breed that can do it all.
Yeah, I think I would have a really hard time even knowing that I was raising an animal like for me to actually
Yes.
eat it and
Yeah.
do all of that. But I mean, maybe I could milk it. I don't know. I'm a city girl, so the
Yeah.
idea of rearing an animal and eating it, I don't know. Like
Sure.
even if I go to a fiber festival and they have the lamb stalls because of they have the sheep there that they're selling for their meat. Like even that's hard for me with like that animal.
Yeah.
But I guess it's one of those things
Absolutely.
where if you're raising them, you need to be able to afford to like feed them and keep it going to sustain
Sure.
having them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as a breeder, I feel it's my responsibility to ensure that top percent, the top performers, they're the ones that make it as breeding stock. Ones that don't grow as well, they may have less parasite resistance. Their fleece may not, if they don't check those boxes, it wouldn't be responsible to use them as breeding stock because you only want to breed what you want more of.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I also like to think that anybody here that does get sold as meat, I know the life that they lived, and I know that they were loved and they were cared for. And I don't treat those that go as meat any different than ones that would, stay here as a breeder or go to another breeder's farm. So I know that they live the possible best life that I could provide for them. So I like to know that, as opposed to a cut of lamb that you might get in the grocery store, you have no idea what kind of life that animal led. So
yeah, that's very true. And so like you were saying that you also have dairy goats. So do they ever like interact with the sheep, or is like
oh
everybody
yeah.
kept separate?
Oh yeah, the three naughty dairy goats. So my boys started in 4-H showing dairy goats. So we have Coco, Flower, and Fancy. Fancy is Coco's daughter, and they showed them. And we had a bunch more goats, but I wanted the space for my sheep. Plus, goats can give you gray hair. I love my goats, but they are tricksters, and you basically need Fort Knox to hold them in fence wise. And I love my sheep. So the boys chose those three as ones that we would keep as pets. We did milk them for quite a while. I made goat's milk soap from their milk, and they had an awesome time showing them in 4-H and did really well with them. And now they're just kind of living their best life, hanging out with the sheep and doing their goat thing. So
So now I don't know this. That's why I'm asking. But when you integrate like sheep and goats together,
yeah,
do they get along well, or is it like the sheep are like, why are these other animals acting so crazy?
yeah.
Like that, like do they
Yeah,
do that like one eyebrow raise? What is that?
yeah.
What is that guy doing?
For the most part, they really do get along well. I do find that my goats can be kind of pushy. So when my ewes are bred, my goats, I'll put them in another field, because the goats at feeding time will headbutt my ewes and things like that. And they're just pushy girls. They want what they want and they want it now. So my goats, when the sheep are bred, my goats will go to a different field, and that way they can't harm them at all by headbutting them. But otherwise they do get along fine. The goats are just pushier. The sheep, at least my sheep, they're happy to just move aside and let the goats have their food. So they do get separated out as needed, but for the most part, they're just part of the family,
That's awesome. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
I know you said you have bees too, and like
Mhm.
how did you get into beekeeping? Because that's also like super
Yeah.
fascinating to me, with the whole idea of like, yes, you want the honey, but you don't want to get stung. So
Right.
how does all of that work?
Yeah, and you do get stung, that's for sure. So I've got about 30 hives, I guess, right now.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of waxes and wanes. Like in the spring, this time of year, we're doing splits. And so the population of my hives grows, and then it kind of condenses down. And so it's always ever changing. I have bees. So a couple of years ago, we got some bees. And I love it. There's a lot of, I'm kind of a science nerd. So there's a lot of science to it, and understanding the dynamics of the hive. And I love all of that. So, we've got the bees, and then of course I harvest honey from them and sell the raw honey. And then, I also, make my beeswax soap with the bees. So I try to utilize everything so nothing goes to waste. But they're also great for pastures too. I mean, you think your clover, it has little flowers on it. They help to pollinate that. And I've noticed a difference in our pasture since having the bees, as well as just all the other plants that we have here as well. Everything, they add to that, the whole little ecosystem, and they're super important.
So like when you go to the store and you go to buy honey and it says Clover honey, then obviously that's because
Yeah.
they're feeding off of the clover. So do you have
Exactly.
to get like a certain bee that like feeds on the clover pollen?
Yeah, not necessarily. So it's really the bees, each hive has about a 5-mile radius as to where they fly out to go forage. And so you'll have, like, clover honey would be considered a monofloral honey. So about 75% of the nectar that's collected would come from clover or wildflower or basswood or tulip poplar, whatever's there. And year to year, your honey changes flavor because if you have a year that's wetter, there's going to be certain plants and trees that thrive in that. And then in a year that's drier, it's going to change the nectar flow. So from year to year, it really changes the taste as well, which is kind of cool to see how it all interacts and is intertwined.
Yeah, I mean, that's really fascinating. So
Yeah.
like, do you put on like the whole beekeeper
Yes.
suit and like get armored up, and like even putting on all of that armor stuff, you still get stung?
Yes. Yeah.
How do they like penetrate that armor? I'd be like putting metal on.
I know, right? And they're tricky little guys and or girls. And you can go into one hive and one day they are just cool as cucumbers and calm, and the next day you open that lid and they are, no pun intended, they're making a beeline for you, I mean, and so just like us, they've got their own little personalities, hive to hive. And it can also depend on the weather too. If you have a storm coming, they can sense that. They might be a little bit more agitated.
Oh, wow.
If the nectar flow is not as strong, they're not as busy going out and getting that nectar, bringing it back. And so you might have more guard bees. There might be more bees at home. You don't necessarily want to go in on an overcast or a super windy day. So there's lots of different factors, but yeah, like I've been stung through my gloves before. They're like a leather glove that you wear. And they can get through that. Even something as simple as, you bend your leg and it kind of tightens the fabric against your leg, you can get stung that way. And just accidental, if you accidentally squish one or something like that, you can get stung too. But
yeah,
they're pretty crafty.
just in my, I wouldn't necessarily even call it like beekeeping experience, but just in my experience with like bees at a close up range, it was really fascinating to me because my mother had multiple sclerosis, and one of the therapies that she tried was this like apitherapy with like bee stings.
The bee stings
and
therapy.
and like actually taking the stingers or the bee when it was alive and applying it to like different parts of her body. And it was really fascinating to me because the bees would come in these little like wooden boxes with screens on them. And my grandmother would take water mixed with sugar and kind of like rub it on the screen to feed them. And then she would take tweezers and try to grab one before it flies out of the box and apply it to these almost like acupressure points.
Yeah.
And, I was seeing my mom now, the thing with like MS is that it really makes your body kind of numb in certain parts. So she wouldn't really feel the stingers. And it was amazing to me because of like all of the different like, drugs and everything that my mom took to help her walk. There was one day that she got stung, I think by like 50 bees. And all of a sudden, like she could stand up and walk for like 5 minutes. And I was so blown away, that like a bee could do that. Cause you think a bee just causes harm in that sense when they sting you, but just that whole, experience of like keeping the bees in the house, and I'm freaking out as a little kid thinking like, oh my God, we're going to die. And we're going to wake up and escape or something. Yeah. So that was a little bit scary, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing. All of the things, like not even just the sheep, but like the bees and the goats and like all the things that animals can do to not only help us, but like you said, the environment and help each other too. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right. So you told us a little bit about the fiber of your fin sheep and all of that, but I'm kind of curious, like what actually got you into fibers in the first place? Like, because I know you said you started with crocheting. So how did you actually get into that?
How did I get into it? I think I just kind of picked it up one day. I don't really remember what the turning point was that made me, I was just curious. And so I kind of just self-taught myself how to crochet, and YouTube wasn't available at that point. So I had to kind of muddle through books to figure it out. And I'm a visual learner, so it's hard learning, from books and things like that, for me at least. I like to be able to really see it. But I just kind of started crocheting, and then wanted my own source of fiber and my own source of yarn. And
I mean, that's a pretty big leap though, to go from like
It
just being
is.
self-taught to
It
crochet to like, oh,
is.
let's just make it a whole thing
Let's
now,
get some
but
sheep. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And that's unfortunately, and I guess fortunately, that's kind of how I do. I'm like, well, let's just jump right in. And it's been good though, because when I just jump right into things, I don't second guess myself, and because I'm an overthinker too.
Oh no, Ashley, are you still there? Hopefully she'll come back. Did we freeze? I'll wait a minute and see. I think she should still be there. Are you there, Ashley? Can you come back? Oh, wait, I think she's coming back. Okay, there you are.
There I
Sorry, we
am.
lost you for a minute.
Sorry.
You're good, you're good. So yeah, so you were saying that like you just go and dive into
Jump
things.
right in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't looked back since, and it's grown and grown and grown.
So how long have you actually had your farm and fiber business?
Since 2012, I guess.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
not too long, but long enough.
Is there anything that like you're curious about learning, or that you're interested in as far as like next steps, since already you have the roving and the yarn, the crocheting and the dyeing, like is there anything else that you're curious about?
I'd really like to improve my knitting. And I'd like to, because I get questions from customers about yarn and for knitting projects, and if nothing else, I want to educate myself on it better. So that I can, what yarn I'm going to say have made at the mill, and really being able to think about if I want it to be a 2-ply or a 3-ply, or, the best, the way that stitch definition would look, or, different things like that. And then also maybe my use of color, and kind of stepping outside the box a little bit with combining colors that maybe I normally wouldn't, but would have amazing results once they're blended.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a color lover in all capacities, both in the spinning and the dyeing part. But it is interesting to me how we have the colors that we enjoy working with, and then we also have the colors that we enjoy wearing. And it took me like a really long time to realize that even though I like working with like the rainbow, I don't necessarily like wearing the rainbow. And being able to come up with projects that are things that I would actually want to use or wear, but also it was kind of interesting to me too that I realized also that I like cotton clothing and not wool so much. And so the idea of, well, what can I make that has wool? Because I like spinning wool. And so trying all different things that you wouldn't maybe like think of as like the first thing, to think of like with hand spun. So it could be just simple things like as, doing like a cotton type of yarn hat, but then you could make like a wool pom-pom, so there's ways that you could have it where it doesn't actually touch your skin, but it's like still part of what you make, yeah. So I think it's always interesting to hear how people get into the spinning, and then where does that take them, and what rabbit holes do they continue to go down.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so in the tradition of it being a holiday when we do these Fiberside chats, we were talking about it, and today's international holiday. I think it's like International Carrot Day. So is there anything about carrots that you would like to share with us? Whether it's your, what is your favorite way to have carrots, or are carrots a favorite snack for your animals?
Yes. Yes, my sheep love baby carrots. I like baby carrots with ranch dressing, personally, just to kind of dip them in. But I don't eat them enough. But my sheep love baby carrots. So sometimes
do they like it with ranch
grab a
dressing
bag
too?
when I'm at the store. Haven't haven't tried that yet. They probably would. Roberto would. He'd like anything.
Yes, definitely having a picture of him with the carrots and the ranch dressing, please, 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 please.
Oh, that's awesome. You know what I did buy for him? Totally off the subject of carrots, but I've been meaning to do it, and I need to do it. So Halloween time, they have like all the dog costumes. I found this super cute honeybee costume. It's got like the little antennas, and it's got like a little thing, like a little shirt thing that they wear. And my plan is to dress Roberto up as a honeybee and get some pictures of him, like kind of near-ish the hives, not near enough that it's gonna like tick him off and they're gonna sting him, but like, or like get him like nosing like a little bottle of honey. I think it'd be adorable. But yeah, so
Definitely.
stay tuned for Roberto as a bee. But
well,
yeah,
you can always Photoshop it so that Roberto doesn't get hurt too. We could always put the bee, take a picture of it and leave Roberto safe.
Right, exactly. No Robertos will be harmed in the making of the images. But yeah, my sheep they absolutely love baby carrots. And it's good for them. So yeah, I have ones in particular. I mean, they will beg. And if a couple days in a row I bring carrots down there, I get mobbed. Like I can't move because they're all like fighting for where are the carrots? Where are the carrots?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I hope that you will celebrate International Carrot Day with them.
I also love animal crack, love the oat and honey granola bars. And yes, I certainly will.
Okay, that would be awesome. Let's see. So there's definitely a lot of comments and questions. So I'm going to go and read them. So there's people that were saying hello to us. So hello, Woolen Fiber Arts Group. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so someone said Finn was my first breed to spin. It's truly my first love. So there you go. You have people that are also Finn fans. They said that it's got lovely fleece, very hardy, and they're great producers.
Yes.
Okay, so then someone said lovely fiber. The only problem is that Ashley's fiber has become so popular at the Woolen Fiber art sales that it sells fast. So there are some problems, I guess, that are just good ones to have.
Exactly. Yeah, it got a little crazy the last two sales, but yeah.
And then someone said Ashley's fiber soap and salve is wonderful. So how do you make the salves?
Oh yeah, so I take my beeswax and I mix the beeswax with solar infused oils. So I'll take like an olive oil or grapeseed oil, and I put it in like a big mason jar, and then I add my herbs. Well, at first I add my herbs to the jar when it's empty, and then top it off with the oil, and that sits like, so it's like making solar tea, like sun tea. So it pulls all the goodness out of those dried herbs. And then I strain that oil and it gets mixed with my beeswax. And then that beeswax kind of hardens it up. So it's kind of like a pot of chapstick kind of thing. And I have it in different sizes, and like I'll use things like plantain and chickweed and rosemary and all kinds of really yummy herbs that are really good for your skin. So we use it as like boo-boo cream in my house, or for, dried elbows, things like that. But you can put it on anything. You can use it on your face, on your body, on all kinds of stuff. It's awesome.
Well, thanks for sharing the ingredients.
Yeah.
I can't tell if it sounds better to use on my skin or to eat, with all those
exactly
flavors in there. Okay. All right. So I think those were all the questions. And then someone said, is there a link to the farm or website? So do you have a link on your Facebook page if people want to go check out?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We're Cedar View Farm VA for Virginia.com. And you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, and started the whole TikTok thing, but I'm still trying to figure it out and get
I was always curious, like how does someone that is using fiber and like in the fiber arts kind of break into the certain social media places, right? Because to me it seems like Instagram and Facebook work well because you have like the picture part, but then like do you go and like dance with Roberto? Like how do you integrate like TikTok video short format into like a farm?
So I tend to have kind of a funny sense of humor. Like I love sarcasm. I love puns. I love, all that good stuff. And I can see where TikTok is gonna really let me express that, where I can do like funny videos, like dancing with Roberto running across the field as a bumblebee, like just fun stuff, funny videos of the sheep, and leave like the Facebook kind of as more of like the business page where we keep it, business appropriate, and then TikTok and things can just be like the fun outlet to really let people see the personality of the animals and me and all that stuff.
Yeah, I just as a visual that came to mind when you were talking about Roberto being in the beekeeper suit or the bee
Uh-huh.
outfit and
Yeah.
going on TikTok. I don't know how all of the music, like royalty, whatever, like all of those things, the music permissions, but definitely
Yes.
the Blind Melon song, what is it, like
Oh
like
yeah.
No Rain, when they have yeah, so definitely to have like Roberto
Yes.
dancing around to that
Yes.
song. For anyone that
Oh, that would
knows
be
Blind Melon,
hilarious.
yeah.
It's
So I
too
would definitely
fun.
love to see that. So please like tag me, let us know,
Yes.
if it goes through. I hope Roberto
Absolutely.
doesn't mind us too much having a little laugh at
Oh,
his expense, but
not
it's
at
all in good
all.
fun. Make sure there's a lot of carrots for him, so
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh, all right. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. I really appreciate your
Yes.
time today. And thank you everybody for joining us for this another episode of Fiberside Chats. And just so you know, for next week, it's going to be April 11th at 1 p.m. And I'm going to be interviewing a good friend of mine, Julie from Fresh Lotus Design. So I'm super excited. She has been a mega help with me and providing all different types of silks for this dyeing project that I had. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to her. So I hope you can come join us. And if you join us a little bit late and you didn't get to see the beginning of this video, don't worry. It's going to be posted in the Wool and Fiber Arts group. You can just do a search for the hashtag Fiberside Chats and you'll be able to watch it whenever you want. And if you want to see any of the previous interviews that I've done with the other amazing wool and fiber art vendors and weavers and shepherds and all of the people that are part of this wonderful community, you can go ahead and click on the hashtag and watch those videos as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Ashley, again. I really appreciate your time today, and I hope you all have a great week.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.